Imagine this, you're standing beside a highway in Texas when an 18-wheeler roars past you. Long hood stretched out front, huge chrome grille, that unmistakable American presence. Now jump across the Atlantic to a road outside Stuttgart, Germany. Another truck passes by. Flat front, shorter body, compact shape. A completely different machine, same job, same kind of freight, but two trucks that look like they were built for different worlds. So, why does one profession, doing the same work on two different continents, end up with trucks that look so radically different? The answer goes much deeper than appearance, and by the end of this video, you may never look at a truck on the road the same way again. Hi, my name is Jeremy, and this is Trucks United, the channel where we break down everything trucks, from engineering decisions most people never notice to the regulations, history, and real-world logic behind the machines hauling everything you own across thousands of kilometers of road. A tale of two trucks. The basics. Before we go any deeper, let's make sure we're talking about the same two designs. Because if you've never really paid attention to this before, the difference becomes impossible to miss once you see it. In America, the most recognizable design is called a conventional truck, often known as a long nose. The engine sits in front of the cab, hidden under a long hood, and the driver sits behind it. Think Kenworth W900, Peterbilt 379, and Freightliner Classic. These are the trucks that look like they rolled straight out of a movie, and honestly, plenty of them have. There is something about that long hood that feels powerful, dramatic, and deeply American. And American truck drivers will absolutely tell you that. In Europe, the dominant design is almost the opposite. It is called a cab-over or cab-over engine, often shortened to CO. There is no long hood sticking out front. The cab sits directly above the engine, giving the truck that flat-faced, upright shape. Think Volvo FH, Mercedes-Benz Actros, Scania R-Series. These trucks look more practical, more compact, and, in a strange way, more futuristic. And yes, before someone says it in the comments, they do look a bit like a brick, a very efficient brick. So those are the two machines. Now let's talk about why they became so different. The roads tell the story. Here is something people often miss when they compare truck designs. The trucks did not simply choose their shape. The roads shaped them. Think about a typical American long-haul run. A driver is out on the interstate system. Wide lanes, long straight stretches, huge open distances between cities. A trip from Los Angeles to Chicago is roughly 3,200 kilometers in an almost straight line. No ancient city centers to squeeze through. No medieval cobblestone streets built 600 years before anyone imagined a semi-truck. Just highway, horizon, and the occasional rest stop with questionable coffee. In that environment, a long wheelbase is not a disadvantage, it is a benefit. It gives a smoother ride, better stability at high speed, and more space inside the cab for the driver. Nobody cruising down Interstate 40 is worrying about whether their truck can make a tight left turn into a tiny loading dock squeezed between two Renaissance-era buildings. Now look at Europe. The road environment is completely different. Yes, Europe has highways, and many of them are excellent. But European truck drivers also deal with city centers, narrow urban roads, and loading zones that were clearly never designed for a vehicle that is 18 meters long. Countries like the Netherlands, Belgium, and parts of Italy and Germany have dense urban infrastructure where space is genuinely limited. Put a long-nosed truck with a huge hood into central Amsterdam and you have a logistical nightmare. A flat-faced cab-over that is shorter and easier to maneuver makes far more sense, and there is another important advantage. The cab-over places the driver higher and farther forward, giving a clearer view of the road, fewer blind spots, and better awareness of pedestrians and cyclists in a dense urban environment. That is not just convenient, it is a real safety feature. So before we even talk about regulations or culture, The physical reality of American and European roads was already pulling truck design in two completely different directions, the regulation game. Now this is where the story gets even more interesting. Because if the roads pushed truck design one way, regulations pushed it even harder. Let's begin with length. In Europe, a standard semi-truck, meaning the tractor and trailer together, cannot exceed 18.75 meters, or about 61 feet total. That limit applies to the entire vehicle combination. So, if the goal is to carry as much cargo as possible, and of course it is, the tractor itself has to be as short as possible. Every meter added to the cab is a meter taken away from cargo space, and in freight, where capacity directly affects revenue, that meter is expensive. A cabover solves this perfectly because the cab sits directly over the engine. You do not waste length on a hood stretching out in front. The tractor stays compact, the trailer can be as long as the rules allow, and the operator maximizes cargo on every run. Now here is where the history becomes fascinating. America was not always dominated by long nose trucks. Back in the 1940s, 1950s, and 1960s, cabovers were actually very common in the United States. For the same reason they remain common in Europe today. American regulations at the time limited the total combined length of the tractor and trailer. So manufacturers built cabovers to save length and increase cargo space. Then came 1982. A new federal regulation changed everything. The new rules limited only the trailer length to 53 feet and removed the cab from the length calculation. Suddenly, American manufacturers could build longer cabs and longer hoods without reducing legal cargo capacity, and that is exactly what happened. Longer hoods, larger cabs, more room, more comfort. The cabover began fading from American highways. Not literally overnight, but within roughly a decade, the conventional long nose had taken over the long-haul sector. Europe never had that same regulatory shift. The total length limit remained, so Europe stayed with the cabover while America moved in a different direction. Then there are speed limits in Europe. Trucks are restricted to 90 kilometers per hour, which is roughly 56 miles per hour on most roads. In parts of the United States, trucks can legally travel up to 129, even 137 kilometers per hour. That is a huge difference. And it has real engineering consequences, which we will come back to shortly. And then there are driving hours. American truck drivers are legally allowed to drive up to 11 hours within a 14-hour working window. European drivers are capped at 9 hours. More legal time behind the wheel means more time living inside the cab. And that makes comfort even more important on the American side. Put all of these rules together and you can see how regulations pushed American and European truck design in fundamentally different directions. This was not random. It was engineering responding to the rules of the road. Comfort, lifestyle, and the owner-operator culture. Here is something that may surprise people who have never been around the American trucking world. A large number of American truck drivers own their own trucks. They are called owner-operators, and they are a major part of the culture, and when the truck is yours. When you bought it, maintain it, drive it, and sometimes live in it for weeks or months at a time. The inside matters a lot. Think about that for a moment. Weeks in a truck, that is not a commute. That is a lifestyle. The American trucking industry has built an entire ecosystem around that reality. Pull into a major truck stop in the United States and you can find showers, laundry facilities, restaurants, chapels, and in some places even movie theaters. And inside those long-nosed Peterbilts and Kenworths, you will often find refrigerators, microwaves, proper beds, wardrobes, and sometimes televisions. Some owner-operators spend more time customizing their sleeper compartments than most people spend decorating their apartments, and honestly, I respect that. If that is your home, make it feel like home. European trucking culture is different. Owner-operators do exist, but they are far less dominant. The industry is more centered around larger fleets and logistics companies, where drivers are more often employees rather than independent operators. Routes tend to be shorter, or at least broken up more often by mandatory rest stops and rest days. So, while drivers absolutely can spend a few nights in a European cab-over, and modern ones are genuinely comfortable, the expectation is different. You are not really building a home, you are building a work vehicle. That cultural difference explains why American cabs are larger, more heavily equipped, and much more personalized for many American drivers. The truck is not just a tool. It is part of who they are. Safety and visibility. Now let's talk about something that does not get enough attention: safety. Specifically, what happens in a collision in a cab-over truck. The driver sits right at the front of the vehicle. There is basically a windshield between the driver and whatever the truck is about to hit. Modern cab-overs are absolutely engineered with serious crash protection, reinforced cabs, and Crumple's owns designed for that layout. But the physics are still the physics. The driver is at the front, in a long-nose conventional truck. The engine sits ahead of the driver. In a major frontal crash, that engine absorbs a significant part of the impact before the force reaches the cab at highway speeds. And remember, American trucks often travel significantly faster than European ones. That extra buffer matters. It is one reason why, as American trucks became faster after regulations changed, the long-nose design made more and more safety sense. But cab-overs have a major advantage of their own: visibility, because the driver sits high and forward with no long hood blocking the view. Sightlines are much better. In a busy urban environment where pedestrians, cyclists, cars, and delivery vehicles are constantly close to the truck, that visibility advantage can directly reduce accidents. And in Europe, where trucks regularly operate in exactly those environments, that benefit matters. So even when it comes to safety, neither design is simply better in every situation. Each one is safer in the environment it was built for. Aerodynamics and speed. This part is quick but important. Aerodynamics ... at higher speeds. The shape of a truck starts to matter more and more. Air resistance increases dramatically as speed rises, and fuel efficiency depends heavily on how cleanly a vehicle cuts through the air. A long-nose conventional truck, with its sloped hood and more tapered front end, is generally more aerodynamically efficient at high speed than a flat-faced cab-over at 90 km per hour. The European speed limit for trucks. The aerodynamic difference between a cab-over and a long nose is relatively modest. Manufacturers use deflectors, fairings, and roof spoilers, and modern European cab-overs are very well optimized for their operating speeds. But at 129 or 137 km per hour, that aerodynamic advantage becomes much more important. Over thousands of kilometers, the fuel savings can become very real. That is another reason the long nose makes sense in America. While the cab-over works perfectly well in Europe, the history behind the split. We already touched on this in the regulations section, but it is worth slowing down for a moment to understand just how dramatic the 1980 change really was before that regulation shift. Cab-overs were everywhere in America. Manufacturers like International, Mack, Kenworth, and White Motor Corporation were all building cab-overs for the American market because the rules encouraged it. Drivers used them, fleets bought them. They were a completely normal sight on American highways. Then the rules changed, and within roughly a decade, cab-overs had almost disappeared from the American long-haul sector. That is how powerful regulation can be in vehicle design. It does not matter what drivers prefer or what engineers think looks elegant. If the rules create a strong economic incentive, the market follows, and that is what makes this so fascinating. Europe never had its 1980 moment. The total length rule stayed, so the cab-over stayed till continents reached one regulatory fork in the road. And from that point forward, the entire character of their trucking industries began to split. So this is where we end up. American trucks and European trucks look different, feel different, and are built around very different priorities. But neither one is wrong, they are both the right answer to different questions. The American long-nose conventional truck is the right answer when the question is, how do I move freight across thousands of kilometers of wide-open highway at high speed with a driver who may be living in this truck for the next 3 weeks, under regulations that let me make the cab as large and comfortable as I want? The European cab-over is the right answer when the question is, how do I move as much cargo as legally possible within a strict total length limit through dense urban environments at controlled speeds, with strong visibility and compact maneuverability? Same profession, different questions, different answers, and honestly, that is beautiful. What is so remarkable about this whole topic is how clearly it shows the relationship between engineering and environment. These trucks were not designed in isolation. They came from roads, from laws, from culture, from economics, from decades of drivers and operators telling the industry what they actually needed. That is how good engineering works. Now, I want to hear from you. Which design do you prefer? Are you a long-nosed person or a cab-over person? And if you are a driver, I especially want to know what your daily reality demands from your truck. Drop it in the comments below, because some of the best insight I have ever gotten comes from people who live this life every single day. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to Trucks United for a lot more. We cover everything from axle mechanics to road trains to the future of electric freight. And we are just getting started. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next